Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I am Simran Malhotra, principal at Ramey and Associates. We are the lead consultants on the zoning code update for the city of Palmdale. I have with me today from Ramey and Associates, Alessandra Lundin, associate with our firm. She's been the project manager and the lead writer of the code. On our team, we also have Lisa Weiss Consulting, who have helped us with some portions of the writing of the code as well. From the city, we have Megan Taggart, planning manager, Louise Garibay, who's the director of economic and community development, and Jasmine Alvarado, who has also been integral to the process. Welcome. Megan, would you like to say a few words before we get started?
Sure. Thank you, Simran. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us this evening. We're looking forward to sort of going at a high level through the zoning code and then getting some comments and feedback. And we are really excited to move this project along. It does implement our general plan that we just adopted in September of last year. And hopefully, as you'll see, it's really streamlining processes and trying to make development and things like that easier moving forward. So Simran, go ahead.
Thank you, Megan. So we have a brief presentation. We'll highlight how we got here, and then Alessandra will walk us through how the zoning code, which is Title 17 of the municipal code, is organized. And then we'll pause for questions and answer any question you might have, and then also if there are specific standards you needed more information on, we'd be happy to share those. So let's get started. So as Megan mentioned, the city adopted a new general plan in the fall of last year in September, and to be in compliance with state law, the city has to update the zoning map and the code to be consistent with the general plan. In addition, the code needs to comply with recent state and federal legislation that has been passed over several years. As those of you who work with the code know, it has not been comprehensively updated in several decades, really, and that has led to some inconsistencies, and it's been and has had reduced ease of use for both planning staff and also project applicants. The code also needed to be updated to include best practices to keep up with current times. The permits and procedures have been clarified and streamlined to be consistent with state law and general plan policies. And in essence, the purpose of the update was to provide a more logically structured and user-friendly code that is highly illustrated. So we've been working on this since last summer, late summer, and we started with reviewing the code, had stakeholder interviews, identified what needed to be updated to be compliant with the general plan, and identified other opportunities for updating. That led to more detailed recommendations for what goes into the code, which led to several drafts of the code that city staff reviewed and provided us feedback with. We released the public draft in late December, and now we are going through this review process with the public, the community, developers, and residents, business owners, property owners, etc. And then we plan on going to the Planning Commission for a hearing in early February, and then on to the City Council in mid-March. So this map, which shows the draft zoning map, is entirely consistent with the general plan land use map. So the land use designations that are in the general plan have been implemented through various zoning designations. For the most part, there's a one-to-one correlation between the land use designation and the new zone district that applies, especially for residential and mixed-use zones. For the commercial and industrial zone, in some cases, there have more than one zone implements a general plan. And when we get to the industrial and commercial divisions, Alessandra will point out how those correlate with each other. I'll also note that the map covers all the parcels within city boundaries, but it also provides information on what might happen in the areas which are within the sphere of influence, which currently are within the county, if they were to be annexed into the city. So it provides the property owner information today that if they are annexed into the city, what their new zoning would be. It's called pre-zoning, and the map shows what that zoning is. And with that, I will turn this over to Alessandra to walk us through the organization of the new code.
Thanks, Simran. Good evening, everyone. As Simran mentioned, I'm going to provide a high-level overview of the zoning code. Next slide, Simran. So on this slide, you can see the high-level table of contents. The code is divided into 10 different divisions, and I'm going to go through and provide a brief overview of each one on the coming slides. So Article 1 provides the introductory provisions for the code, including the purpose and authority, interpretations, designation of all the zones and districts, the official zoning map, and an extensive list of definitions. Next slide. Division 2 contains all the administration and review procedures related to land use and development in the city. At the beginning of the division is a table summarizing the review authorities for various types of decisions and appeals. This division covers common procedures such as application forms and fees, pre-application review, public noticing and appeals, among others. It also includes all of the permits and approvals such as zoning clearance and site plan review, use permits, including conditional use permits, temporary use permits, variances, among others. The article also includes procedures for general plan and zoning amendments and other types of plans such as specific plans and development agreements. And lastly, this article provides provisions for non-conforming uses and structures. Next slide. Division 3 contains the land use regulations and development standards for all of the residential zones in the city. So it includes a description of each zone, a table of the permitted, conditionally permitted, and prohibited uses by zone, development standards and supplemental standards for single family and multifamily development. And then lastly, it includes standards for 2-unit developments and urban lot splits to meet new state laws, basically SB 9. Next slide. This table provides an overview of all the residential zones, their densities, and the corresponding general plan designations. So as you can see, and Simran mentioned, there's a one-to-one correlation between each zone and each general plan designation, with the exception of the mobile home zone, which can be found within the RN1 and RN2 general plan designations. Next slide. And then here you can see a screenshot of the use table I mentioned for all the residential zones, showing each detailed land use category and whether it's permitted, conditionally permitted, or prohibited in each zone. And you can kind of see all of them across the board. It's really easy to kind of quickly glance at the zone and then see what's allowed. Next slide. So development standards are organized into tables for each grouping of zones, making it really easy to see standards all in one location and compare them side by side for similar zones. The tables cover lot and density standards, such as minimum and maximum density, minimum lot size, width and depth, lot coverage, height limits, minimum and maximum setbacks, and usable open space requirements. And then supplemental standards in Division 3 include site planning and building design standards for detached single-family zones, and site planning and neighborhood transition standards for multifamily residential development. And note that most design standards for multifamily development are regulated by the city's multifamily and mixed-use design standards documents. Next slide. Division 4 regulates all of the commercial and office zones in the city, including neighborhood commercial, regional commercial, visitor commercial, medical flex, educational flex, and office flex zones. Again, it's organized in the same manner as Division 3 with a description of each zone, land use regulations table, and development standards. It also contains supplemental design standards for commercial and office developments, such as standards for building modulation and articulation, entries, ground floor retail, and materials and colors, just to name a few. Next slide. The following table provides an overview again of all of the commercial office zones, their intensities, and corresponding general plan designations. As you can see, there's generally a one-to-one correlation between each zone and each general plan designation, with the exception of office flex, which corresponds to employment flex in the general plan, as does light industrial, which I'm going to talk about on the coming slides. Next slide. Division 5 regulates all of the mixed-use zones in the city and follows the same format as the other zone divisions, with a land use table, development standards, and supplemental performance standards for mixed-use development. And as I noted previously, design standards for mixed-use development are regulated outside of the code in the city's multifamily and mixed-use design standards document. Next slide. And then once again, here you see a table of the mixed-use zones and their corresponding general plan designations, which match one-to-one. Next slide. Division 6 contains the land use regulations, development standards, and supplemental design standards for industrial zones in the city. So once again, it follows the same general format. So there's light industrial, heavy industrial, aerospace industrial, and mining resource extraction. And then on this table, you can see the industrial zones, their intensity, and corresponding general plan designation. So both the light industrial and the heavy industrial zones fall within the industrial general plan designation. So there's two zones that help implement that general plan designation. Next slide. And then Division 7 covers all of the special purpose zones in the city, including all the public facility zones, open space, utilities and right-of-way, and areas governed by specific plans. And again, it's organized basically in the same manner as the previous zone divisions. And next slide. Division 8 contains all of the general development standards that apply citywide or to multiple zones in the city. So it includes regulations for parcels, setbacks, accessory structures, such as detached garages, transitions between uses and zones, performance standards, utilities and services, including location and design standards for trash enclosures, landscaping, lighting, walls and fences, and off-street parking and loading. And then it also contains all of the city's sign standards and animal keeping. And this division was reorganized and revised to really reflect best practices. For instance, we reduced parking ratios for certain uses and provided incentives for car share, transit access, and other transportation demand management measures. And then we also added design standards for parking lots and structures. Next slide. And lastly, Division 9 provides site planning, development, and operating standards for specific uses or activities in the city that require special standards to ensure compatibility with neighboring uses and/or health and safety. And it's organized by general use category. So some examples of the types of uses regulated in this section: for residential uses, that includes accessory dwelling units, cottage food operations, mobile homes. Within commercial uses, it covers adult-oriented businesses and alcoholic beverage establishments, drive-throughs, and massage establishments, just to name a few. And then for industrial, mini storage and warehousing, salvage yards, and then it also goes into recycling facilities, renewable energy structures, and such. And that concludes our presentation for this evening.
Thank you, Alessandra. I'll stop sharing and I can always pull up any slide we need. But we are here for the rest of the time to answer any questions you might have about what's in the code or any specific parcel on the map. So if folks want to raise their hand so we can call on you one at a time. Yeah, I see a question in the chat. What is the difference in commercial vehicle parking primary allowed under heavy industrial zoning and parking servicing, repair, storage of trucks and trailers allowed under freight or trucking facility that comes under aerospace industrial zoning? Alessandro, did you
Yes.
want to answer that?
Yeah, so a freight and trucking facility, again, that's that's where you might have trucks pulling in, servicing and repair of them. But then commercial vehicle parking, this is where there might be a vacant lot in the city and the property owner wants to lease it out for the parking of commercial vehicles during the day. If that makes sense. Megan, it looks like you wanted to add something.
Yeah, no, I was just looking at specific definitions.
Yeah.
So the freight trucking facility is really defined to be like a truck terminal, whereas the truck storage as a primary use is intended to be just storage of those vehicles.
Just all, I hope that answers your question. If not, you can either share your comment in the chat or unmute yourself or raise your hand and then we'll come back to that. Robert.
Hi there. First of all, my compliments. I have spent some time going through it. It's a great improvement over what we had previously, and it's very clear in terms of especially the land use matrix. It's very well done. One question I had in particular was about the industrial zone. Not quite sure if all the entire industrial zone has 0 setbacks on the side setbacks, but there's some regions that may benefit from a 0 setback in the industrial zone. Is there allowance for that? Was it just overlooked, or where does the city stand on that? Do we have a 10-foot setback circumferentially on every industrial lot throughout the city?
The zoning code as written does require a setback for buildings to be for all buildings in the industrial zones. And then there's a larger setback if you're adjacent to a residential zone. So as of now, there's no 0 setback allowed for in industrial zones.
So how do we accommodate for areas where we have a sandwiched lot where previously they were at 0 setbacks, and now we're going to have a 10-foot corridor between a building and a new building, because now the new code requires a 10-foot setback on the sides or the rear. I mean, it creates tunnels, and it creates areas of potential mismanagement or misuse or crime in that area. How can we address that issue?
That's a good question, Robert. Industrial properties are also, fences and walls are both permitted and encouraged, and I believe in some cases required, right, Alessandra? And so, from a security perspective, the fact that properties are to be fenced and or walled will help prevent any kind of untoward activity happening in those corridors. The requirements are also written if there are two adjacent properties as they develop a 20-foot, there would be a 20-foot separation between buildings, which then potentially that space can be used for, other uses, whether it's parking or landscaping, as well as outdoor spaces for employees, etc. Go ahead, Alessandra. Yeah, I think you were adding something.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, yeah, parking or driveways on the side of a property, for instance.
Is there any consideration made to the fact of, first of all, aesthetics, and secondly, just efficiency of land? If you have an infill land, and if it's circumferentially surrounded by 0 lot line industrial lots, and then you have an infill lot, it makes for a very inefficient design for a property when you dictate now it's 20-foot setbacks on a building. There's not much that can be done in that 20-foot setback with fire lanes and all that stuff to create a design that flows and it's properly done, and it creates a very inefficient circumstance. So what's the rationale for completely eliminating 0 setbacks? What is the rationale for the city that they've decided to go this route?
So in general,
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
I'm just wondering whether it's an aesthetic preference, whether it's what's the rationale for it? I can understand in some areas where it's brand new development and there's nothing going on, and as opposed to, let's say, infills.
Sure. So in general, the intent of the general plan and now the zoning code is to really push buildings closer to the street. So I would not anticipate seeing a building directly at that 10-foot setback line on an interior property line, because I would rather see the parking tucked behind, right? So hopefully it would push your buildings, more towards the front of the site or more towards the center of the site. And those areas could be utilized for some of the open space and other requirements that are needed. There's also an issue, and Simran, you can touch on this, about building openings on property lines as it relates to industrial development.
Yes, thank you, Megan. Alessandra just chatted that to me as well. If you have, from the building code perspective, if you have buildings with openings, there is a separation requirement depending on, what category it falls under from other buildings. And by requiring the separation to happen within a site as opposed to having to do fire rated walls and etc. right at the property line, I think there's an advantage to meeting building code requirements as well.
And is this requirement rigid, or is this open to, I don't know whether I'm using the right terminology or not, but maybe a conditional use or design variation? Is this something where, for say a particular lot, even this planning department may agree that, in this circumstance, it may be, is there flexibility in this code?
So the way the code is written, if an applicant wants to do something different than what the code currently or as written allows, you can go through either a variance process or through let's see, what would it be? It would be Alessandra, help me here. It would either be a variance or it would be,
I think
you could do a PD on the site to come up with your own development standards. So those are the two processes that you would follow if you want to do something different.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. There is a question about from Greg about, do the standards of a specific plan govern if they differ from the revised code? The short answer is, if you're in a specific plan area, the standards in the specific plan will govern. If the specific plan is silent on a topic, it typically refers to the zoning code, and at that time, the standards and regulations in the zoning code will come into play.
And in some instances, a specific plan will point to sections of the zoning code. So then in that instance, the zoning code would also govern.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, there's a question. Why isn't there more business areas near residential areas? Why does the city put all or most retail businesses in the same area when that causes too much traffic backup? The general plan actually spread commercial uses across the city by creating village centers so that at major intersections within near residential neighborhoods, so that there are commercial areas where people can bike to within a 15 to 20 minute walk or a bike ride or take transit to it. So there are business areas that are spread throughout the city. Let's see. Next question. We're going back to the question on the trucks and trailers. Can I store trucks and trailers on a monthly basis without building repair shop or any other building under AI zoning? I have my own trucks. Can I park my semi trucks and trailers on AI zoning? Alessandra, do you want to look at the use table to confirm that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be helpful to know a little bit more about what the primary use of the property is. Is it just for, storing? Just for storing your own trucks and trailers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, vehicle towing and impounding is somewhat similar to that, but it's, I mean, if it's a little bit different, I mean, if it is your own property and your own trucks, I don't think that that's an issue.
I'm just looking at.
If it's your own property, I mean, it would probably qualify under personal storage.
Yeah.
Right. A personal.
Yeah. Outdoor storage.
So under AI zone, a freight or trucking facility is permitted, which is more like a truck stop. Parking lots and structures are also permitted.
But commercial vehicle parking as a primary use is not.
Right. And if you're not leasing out those spaces, that's not the same thing.
So I think, Jessel, I actually think that you came into the counter today and talked to some of the planners about this as well. So if you feel like we're not giving enough information, feel free to send me an email or come back in and we can kind of talk through your specific use at your specific location and kind of talk you through what will and will not work with the zoning code update.
I did yesterday, they were not clear. Okay. So Megan, I think it depends on how you classify the parking, if it is related to, and I think that's something we can consider.
Yeah, or if it's just considered outdoor storage of your own trucks.
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
Okay. They said with repair shop and truck wash, it's allowed. Your hand up. Did you have another question, or was that?
Me, I didn't have a question. I just, if you're talking to me,
Yes.
I just had one potential. I just wanted to draw your attention. There might be a slight discrepancy in the nomenclature and definitions in the visitor commercial section. On section 17.43, it's mentioned that there is long-term stay hotels. It says basically typical VC uses include lodging, and then in parentheses it says e.g. short-term and long-term stay hotels. I'm not quite sure whether, now that does not show up in the definition section. And the only thing that's referred to as lodging extended stay is defined within that realm. So I'm just bringing it to your attention for the sake of, completeness and accuracy, that, if it was an oversight or whether it's understood that, long-term stay is defined as extended stay. And if so,
Extended
it's
stay.
not stipulated.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. It is intended to be the same thing.
Yes.
Extended stay is the same as long-term, but we can make an edit to make sure we use the same language in both locations so as to avoid any confusion.
Yeah, because
Thank you
it's
for
such a
bringing that
beautiful
up.
document and it's so clear, but that's the one spot that I didn't see. So I wanted to bring it up to your attention.
Yeah, eagle eye. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's just in my realm, so I just noticed it.
I'm
There's no
noting it right
genius.
now.
There's no genius here. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. So Jaspal, I think please reach out to Megan and resolve your question. Going back to Cynthia's comment, can you show how many retail businesses areas are within a 20-minute bike ride? Most of these retail from where you live. If you look at the general plan map, I think you can. It'll show you where these village centers are. Some of those businesses, the retail businesses, don't exist, but that's where they could go when, if and when they're built. So once the city is built out for the general plan, the vision is to have retail and other services within close proximity of residences. The city doesn't actually build these businesses. It just provides the framework and the zoning so that a property owner or a developer can come in and actually build those. Okay. There's a question from Greg about, is there a maximum house size in neighborhood residential 1? I thought it was 2,400 square feet. How is this determined, and is there a consideration to raise it?
So sorry, let me just look at the table again. So RN1, that's at a density of 6 to 10 dwelling units per acre, and the minimum lot size is 3,800. I mean, these are very small lots. This is what we call small lot single family. And there's really just not enough space to put an enormous house on a lot that size. And they're really not designed to be that way. So that's why there's a maximum on that one, is that those are specifically the RN 1, 2, and 3. Those are very, very small lots, or in some cases, townhouses or row houses, attached or semi-detached single family.
Yeah, the desire is to make sure that the house is in proportion to the lot size. And as Alessandra mentioned, those are small lots. So the size that's recommended is based on to be appropriately sized for the minimum lot size.
Excuse me, if I may, I'm sorry, but I don't see my raise my hand command on my
oh yeah, no,
screen.
that's
why I'm typing it in. So, but I understand that the 3,000 or 3,800 is a minimum size of the lot, but like it can also be a little bit larger. So about 4,000 or 5,000 square foot lots in that same residential neighborhood 1. We have builders talking about anywhere from 18 to 25 or whatnot. So 2,400 is probably close to the max of what they would want to build. But that's what I was just asking, if there's any flexibility or consideration to raising it, so that if a builder did want to have, say, we have 4,000 or 5,000 square foot lots on a project that we're doing right now, that, if there's a little bit of flexibility to raise that up so that they could, meet the demand?
In Division 2, there are processes laid out where you can go through a minor modification to the standards up to a certain percentage, and I think that can be applied if there was a reason to, for in a case like you described.
Okay, that would be what, about 10 or 20% variance that you can do a kind of a staff
Staff
amendment
approval,
or
I don't
something?
believe it's as high as 20%. I think at most it's 10%.
Okay.
And I will double check that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I guess within that density range, you can do 5,000 square foot lots. So maybe we can take a look at that and.
Yeah, because the project is designed with some open space amenities as well. So it, that takes up some of the land for the density, issue. So.
And it is 10%, Greg, I just double checked.
Okay,
Mhm.
10%,
Yeah.
okay. All right, great. So that
would get you to what,
essentially you go
50.
right.
Mhm.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
There's another comment in the chat.
Oh, I see. It seems there is a lot of traffic buildup on 10th and P Streets near Macy's Shopping Center, which is overbuilt with too many retail businesses in that area, causing a traffic buildup.
So can I talk about a project really quickly, Simran?
Yeah.
So there
Yeah, go
is
ahead.
a capital improvement project in the works to widen basically the stretch of 10th Street West, just north of State Route 14, so just south of Avenue 08, to just south of Rancho Vista Boulevard. So you'd be getting an extra lane in each direction. So that project is in the works. And then Simran, you can talk about the designations.
No, actually, I think your answer is probably what's more appropriate for the comment. So with the potential widening or future widening, that will help alleviate the traffic concerns. The designation around there is it's near the mall. And there are mixed use designations around there, which also, as there's a more of a balance between commercial and residential uses, will also help with improving walkability and hence less reliance on driving. Other questions, comments? Feel free, it's a small group, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question if you have one.
Hi, excuse me. What Megan? What's the date of the Planning Commission that this is going to?
February 9th.
9th. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. So the Planning Commission looks at the code and will make a recommendation to the City Council on February 9th, and then the City Council date is March 15th. We'll also be recording this meeting, and well, it's being recorded and it'll be posted on the project website. The detailed map, the large scale map, if folks haven't seen it, is already available on the website. I'll drop in a link momentarily in the chat. And if there are additional questions, you can reach out to the city at this email address, which is also in the chat. Zoning update, all one word, at cityofpalmdale.org. And I dropped that email address in the chat as well. Well, the zoning team is going to hang out here till our allotted time. But if you don't have any questions and would like to get on with your evenings, you're welcome to drop off or ask another question, make a comment if while you have a captive audience here.
Yes, I would like to know why there aren't more trees along streets for shading purposes on city streets.
Thank you, Cynthia. I agree there could be more street trees in the city of Palmdale, and the general plan actually establishes a goal and a policy of planting more trees within the city. This is going to be obviously it's a huge city, over 100 square miles. It'll take some time for those trees to be planted. The zoning code actually requires for trees to be planted on private property, especially in the front yards in certain land uses. So that'll also improve the tree canopy in the city.
Yes, well, that doesn't help the people that are on the main roads that are not where the residential areas are. And I want to know why they can't plant more drought tolerant trees like they do in Tucson, Arizona.
Yes, as I said, it is a policy in the general plan to plant more trees on the major arterials and other streets within the city. It will take some time for that policy to be implemented, but it's a goal that's been established. Often funding is an issue, and then maintenance, especially in even drought tolerant plants and trees need some watering. But so the city is working towards a program where if new trees are planted, then there's adequate maintenance and watering that can be done to make sure that they survive and actually thrive.
Yeah, they should look at the city of Tucson for the type of drought tolerant trees that grow naturally in desert areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see any trees along major roads. And I want to know what the time frame is for implementing that.
Megan, did you have any information on?
I don't at this time. The issue with installation of trees in parkway areas between roadways and sidewalks is maintenance. One of the big issues is maintenance. When trees are within an area that is immediately adjacent to a development, typically that's maintained by what would be called a landscape maintenance district or the developer of that site. So we do have goals in place where we are intending to install more parkways and get more trees and more shade, because we do acknowledge that we live in a very hot climate, and people will, number one, it will increase safety, and number two, it will make these areas more desirable for people to walk and get outside. So it is a goal of ours to make sure that we are installing more of these. As far as timing, timing is different because different projects are different priorities, and we have a list basically of capital improvement projects that occur throughout the city, and it sort of varies on when those occur based on funding and all sorts of other circumstances. So we do have lists of CIP projects that are publicly available, so you can kind of see what areas we're working on revitalizing when, but like I said, it is different for every location in the city.
Thank you, Megan. Robert, go ahead.
I had a question regarding this. It's not new, but it has a new nomenclature now. It's called service departments. They're essentially corporate housing apartments for corporate housing that are fully furnished, and they're serviced like a hotel. Previously, most of these are basically they are conformed from an existing building structure, and then they're basically reused or redesigned as a service department complex. But what has been your experience with cities that are doing this as a new build, where it's a service department, new construction, ground up, in terms of entitlement on that? Are they entitled as multifamily? Are they entitled as hospitality? What other provisions are there for cities to be able for developers to be able to build such a thing in particular zones?
That's a good question. Most cities I've worked in don't have service departments called out as a separate land use. They tend to either have, a multifamily project, which is just regular housing, or, hospitality or a hotel, mostly extended stay, that falls under that category. And service departments generally, because they are shorter term stays, fall more in the the hotel category in my mind than they do in the residential.
Sure, absolutely. I agree with you 100% that it does fall more into the long-term or extended stay category, but that's just from a categorical, conceptual component of that. But when it comes down to entitlement and also just financing and all that, a lot of these projects, they need to be entitled as multifamily and run as a hospitality. And because of the fact that the design and the build and everything, they're actual apartments. They're not hotel rooms. So the reason I have this question is I just don't know whether you've come across cities where they've had this issue, where there has been a need or a requirement or a request to build a service department project, but the zoning does not allow for it because it's not multifamily, and how it's handled in that situation. Because it's virtually impossible to build such a thing unless it is entitled as multifamily and run as a hotel. So I want to know if you have any experience with that at all.
No direct experience, Alessandro. I don't know if you've run across this. In my mind, it really should be entitled as a hotel project, not multifamily. But I don't have any experience with the exact, the scenario you're describing.
Yeah, I think in my experience, it's been more that it's not an entire building, you know, if it's an apartment building, maybe a company owns or rents out a few of the units as corporate apartments, but not as like an entire project.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to drop off. Thank you, everybody, for all your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Robert.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your time, everyone. Appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Greg.
Greg.
Thanks.
As a reminder, the Planning Commission is on February 9th and City Council on March 15th.